Hello and welcome everybody to the Steven Cimino Says Boom podcast, episode issue 16, our Super Stan Lee special.
Boom!
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Could never be done. Getting to issue 16, they thought we would have already broken up like the Beatles, being at each other, but here we are. But this time, we're doing something even bigger. We finally made it to our super duper Stan Lee special edition issue with my co-host Steve Says Boom. And then below us, we got Otto from the Grotto from Three Men in a Basement. Otto, tell people what we need them to do.
It's the simplest thing ever, John. All they got to do is like, comment, share these videos, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate you guys watching. This has been a lot of fun. The feedback has been growing. We've got Marvel legends that are commenting about how great this stuff is, and we made it this far. We're still going, and we're going to keep on going. So thank you very much for everybody's support on sharing and liking all of our videos.
Okay, everybody, and right below me, that's not the Winter Soldier. This is. People might ask, who, if we're doing a Stan Lee special, who would we talk to? Stan has went to the great beyond. Roy, we have on. We like to talk about Roy, but this guy below us, Mr. John Hairspray Bolerjack. And why do we call him Hairspray? Because this was below us was Stan Lee's confidant, especially in the last years of his life that a lot of people don't know. John, why don't you give a little introduction about yourself and tell people, how first your foray into comics and then going to the Marvel gates and getting to know Mr. Stan Lee himself.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I worked at a comic store in San Diego when I was 13, all the way up till I was 26. So I was already a pretty firm comic nerd by that point. And then I had left that and I worked for DC Comics as an inker for a while. And then I got married and needed real money. And inkers out there, shout out, what I'm talking about. So I had to, so I decided to go to film school. And I got into video editing and production and whatnot. And I had initially, once I got out of film school, started working in documentary film. And a friend of mine was working with Stan. And I thought this would be awesome. I'm a big nerd. I could Trojan horse my way into meeting Stan if I could, film something with him. And so we sort of pitched him on the idea of doing a reality show about his travels, because I thought it was pretty fascinating that he was at that point, he would have been a spry 89. Going to conventions and whatnot. So that's how I got sort of introduced to Stan. But then you can't film someone so frequently and not become friendly with them and familiar with them. And I sort of broke the cardinal rule where he stopped being a subject and started being more of a friend. And the film, there's this the graph of filming went down and the friendship went up, and we just sort of became more friendly with each other. And I was lucky enough to sort of earn his trust and be around him in some really critical times for him. And that's basically how I got into with Stan. I mean, people always ask, you must have a great sort of origin story. You must have done something. And I'm like, you know what? It's just pure luck. I happened to be walking down a hallway at a convention at the same time as my friend, and we bumped into each other and started talking. And had I gone to the bathroom 5 minutes earlier, I would have missed him, and we never would have had that conversation that led me there. So,
See, what a lot of people don't also realize is that okay, we can go into Stan's what was going on a lot, like in his history and like in the time you were there. But I want to tell people a little the relationship that we have. It was very interesting because during the last years of Stan's life, that he was in a bad way. And I remember you telling me he was every bit of 95. I remember you said that, like he wasn't the Stanley of old. And Roy has been wanting to, Thomas always wanted to see him. I've been trying to get them together since 2006. And a mutual friend of ours that passed away, Chandler Rice, he calls me, no, I called him up, I forget, like 2018, early 2018, and I asked him, like, I was like, Chandler, like, let's try to get Roy, and because Roy kept asking me, let's try to get Roy and Stan together and all that stuff. And he goes, I know a guy named his handle. He said some of the other people that weren't good were already gone, and he goes, there's this new guy, John Bolerjack, and I said, oh, can you talk to me? So that's how we started. I remember I called you, I left you a message, and you called me back. But it was a funny thing that when we were in the car together when we were discussing this. You didn't really know me, and I didn't really know you. But I remember saying to you, I said, "Isn't this funny? We're two Johns trying to get these two super legends that are good friends together." And it's up to us because of all this stuff that was going on in all their lives, and we made it happen. And it was very, Roy was always very thankful, and it was so appreciative of us. And because you gave me the ability to give Roy that happiness, which you gave all of us. I mean, so I'll never forget when Roy walked into the room with Stan, and he goes, and Stan said, getting to 95, getting to 100 isn't what it was always cracked up to be. But I remember when Roy walked in the room and Stan then he got that big smile, like, I don't know if he knew he was going to see Roy. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't at that time. But when he saw Roy and I saw that smile, I started getting a little crying in the room, and I was like, oh my God, what a moment. But you were the guy that was able to get us in there just to give them that little bit of happiness that they deserve so they could be together. And that, I mean, that's a part of comic history. And a lot of people don't know this about John because he's very low key. He's not loud and obnoxious like me, that always trying to get out there, always mugging for the camera. But John is the unsung hero in Stan Lee's life. That Stan needed somebody there, and nobody knew. I remember the press and all that. Oh, we got to save Stan. There was a guy saving Stan and doing the best he could. In the way that he could do it is Mr. John Bolerjack, who Stan dubbed Hairspray. So John, tell us. What I want to know is, first off, when I remember you telling me that you would go to breakfast with Stan and tell me some of the private moments with Stan and some of the good conversations that you had, because you were giving Stan that peace of mind when he needed it, and even though he didn't know he needed it, you were still giving it to him. And that is something that comic history and those shitty biographies that have been coming up that we both know that was just scandalous. And tell us about that.
So, I mean, the thing is, there's sort of two. Well, the first dynamic that's what I try to sort of explain to people is that, Stan was 95, so there's like, infinite versions of Stan. I know the 89 to 95-year-old version, right? The idea of the 75-year-old Stan could be a totally different, sort of person. Like it's weird to know someone so well for a certain time of their life, because then when I talk to Roy and Roy talks about Stan, I think to myself, I wonder if that Stan would have been like, get out of here, you long-haired hippie. Like, it's weird to sort of think to be sort of in one zone of period of someone's life. And so for me, I sort of got two versions of Stan, because I still got the initial young, I say young, 89, but, fully there, very well-spoken, jumping stairs when he's going down, hopping down one or two stairs, or sort of thing. And then I got the sort of the more declined, correct for his age version of Stan. So I really got to sort of see it happen in sort of real time. So early on, the younger Stan, yeah, a lot of the intimate moments were just him just talking about, he just sort of you'd see his gears start turning and he just asked me a really random question, something like, what movies are popular right now? And then, because he was going blind, his macular degeneration was sort of kicking in, and he didn't really go to a lot of movies and whatnot. So he'd ask what's popular. Then if he hadn't heard of it, if I said Sonic the Hedgehog, he'd go, what the hell is that? And I'd have to describe that it's a video game about a blue hedgehog. And then that would lead into a conversation about why that's popular. And we'd sort of go down a lot of rabbit holes because he'd want to sort of keep up with what's popular. And so that was kind of a lot of our conversations. But as he got older and his wife had passed away, he really got a lot, not that he wasn't introspective before, but he got a lot more, introspective about life and death and sort of the meaning of it all. And there was a big taper off of sort of more lighthearted conversations. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like he was always joking and we were laughing a lot, but you could tell that he was really starting to sort of think about things more and sort of reflect on a lot of his life and decisions that were made and whatnot. So it got more serious as we got more towards the end, end run. So, I mean, but sometimes we'd have to just kill time. There was a time where we were in Tokyo coming back, and it was me and him sitting in a lounge, and our flight got delayed by a couple hours, and we sat, and he told me about every girl he had dated from like the first girl he dated at like 13. And the thing was, he at that point couldn't have told you what he had for breakfast because his short-term memory was pretty gone, but he could tell me that, Lizzie, blah, 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 lived on this street at this, whatever. And he could just tell you everything. And he just went from girl to girl, and he's like, and that one didn't work out because, and he just knew it like it was yesterday. And so that's the stuff that I like the most is sort of hearing about those times. And we used to have this thing where I'd take an old issue of like Tales to Astonish or something that I'd buy for $5 at a store, and I'd just open it and I would go, I'd go to the first story and I'd go, tell me about, whatever, Dick Ayers, tell me about him. What was he like? And then he'd say something like, oh, he was really great. He could draw women fantastic, but oh my God, his backgrounds were terrible. And then I'd look and sure enough, like the women were great and the backgrounds were terrible. And then I'd go to the next person. I'd go, tell me about this person. And he'd sort of recount his experiences with them. Wow. And have little anecdotes and whatnot. And it was just kind of fun for him, it gave us something to talk about. Cause I was spending at the end of Stan's life, I had finagled my work schedule to be night. So I was spending like 10 hours a day with him, like just keeping him company. So you got to have content to talk about. Otherwise it gets pretty boring. So it was fun to sort of give us something to talk about. And also I felt really lucky because I'm just sitting there like getting a oral history of Marvel stuff one-on-one, and he's just going through all these old stories about stuff. So that's was kind of the kind of conversations we were having.
In the last moments of his memory, I remember you telling me that he could explain things, but even if like he could be manipulated and then like still talk about it like it was real. That was going on till the end. Can you explain that?
Yeah,
like
it's hard. It's one of those things because it's a common misconception that at the end Stan was like completely like out of it or like didn't understand like where he was or like, and that's actually it's a little more clarification than that, because the thing is like I could have come to Stan towards the end and gone, or even more towards the end, but I could have gone to Stan and said, Stan, an alien ship just landed on Hollywood Boulevard. Like it's insane. It landed and people are out there taking photos of it. And he would take you at your word that it happened. And then he could have a real conversation with you about it. So then he'd say, oh my God, it's out there. What color is it? Like, are there ambulances? Like, it's not that he just didn't understand. Like he was this old man who didn't have his wits about him. He was just ever trusting. Because to him, it wouldn't make any sense. Like, why would you come lie to me about something? Like, why, you're obviously going to tell me the truth. So then he would just react and have he could write down what he said and it would be very coherent and it would be all the questions you'd ask if it was real. And so he was like there, like he had a thought process, like he could process the thoughts and the situations. It's just that he was overly trusting. So if I just read the script of Jurassic Park and told him it happened, he'd just believe you. And then he'd have a bunch of questions about the dinosaurs. And so that's more what it was like. It wasn't ever that he was like, out of it, really. He was always coherent with his
yeah. Roy told me that like if anybody could get the job done for Stan, you'd come along for the ride. Like It was that simple. And
Yeah.
and in its innocence, that's why a lot of the vultures he was easily taken advantage of, because, oh, you're doing this for me. Oh, all right, let's go. And so you can see how that happened in the later parts of his life. And him, and like you just said, him talking, and he could do an interview and he could sound like he knows what's going on, but they don't know what was going on behind the scenes, and that knowing that, maybe he doesn't really know what's going on.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like you just tell him. I mean, it would take a sort of negative skill to where someone could just, if you needed Stan to say something, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. If you needed Stan to say something, you wouldn't just go necessarily right to him and say, I need you to say this. You would just come up with that truth that would lead him to say it, because then also Stan believes it. So you're never so overtly saying, Stan, I need you to lie. Like, I need you to lie to this promoter and say that you didn't sign that much stuff. You'd go to Stan like an hour before and say, man, Stan, we didn't sign that much stuff. And now you've like inceptioned it in his brain. So when the promoter comes by and goes, how was it? Stan goes, we didn't sign that much stuff. Like, you don't just overtly tell him to lie, like sort of like, and so that's more of like that's, but again, he's trusting. So why would you lie? That's sort of.
Yeah. Steve, you got something?
Sure. It's funny, but the beginning of the end for Stan actually began in the early 2000s. People don't realize this. He did a show at the Frank and Sons warehouse where he was just doing some signing. And, it was crazy. I didn't even get a chance to really see him. But there was a person there that used to frequent Frank and Sons. His name. And he was like a grifter, like a floating whatsoever. And then legend has it that when he went to see Stan, he was like, so Stan, who's representing you? And Stan, which, has yet to be confirmed to me, was sort of on his own and didn't have anyone with him protecting him, keeping bad people away. In short order, somehow, this began representing Stan. And this is the question that's going to haunt, I think, people in our industry and historians for a long, long, long time. And it's something that's been bothering me easily 15 years. I always thought that when Stan had the time, he was going to be able to do his memoirs like Churchill did, like Washington did, go back and start setting the record straight while he still remembered that stuff. Okay? But from the outside, all we saw was this circus and people coming along, pushing him out there, sign. So my thing is, when you came along in 1989, when he was 89, I should say, what was his mindset? If he was still sharp, did he have any intentions to try and set the record straight or to put his words down so we don't have to rely on other people doing these ridiculous books, okay, which we've had to suffer through? Was he even leaning in that direction, or was it just like he was sidelined?
The thing is like I never, in all my conversations with Stan about that, he never really had, he never really seemed to have expectations or dreams of sort of writing his own sort of biography, his own sort of truth. For all the bravado and the loud and the EXCELSIORs and whatnot of him, I asked him once, Stan, when did you feel famous? Like, when did you start to realize you're famous? And he said, when I started doing the cameos. So
Yes.
up until that point, like, he had created Spider-Man and all these things, or co-created Spider, all these things, and he didn't even acknowledge himself as famous. Like, he sort of thought he was just a regular guy. And so because of that sort of attitude, he didn't think that it warranted a biography about a very somehow average man. And as he was doing the cameo, in the end phase of his life, he was a generally relatively happy man, and he seemed very fulfilled. And I think that I honestly don't think not that he didn't care, but I think that he felt that he had accomplished kind of everything he had wanted to. And I don't think he felt the need to go back and correct everything. He was one of the most fulfilled people I'd ever met. And sometimes I feel like when you go back to write things, you want to linger in the past of your sort of greatness, or maybe better times past. And he felt like he was in them still, sort of like he was very fulfilled as a person. And so he never really felt the need to correct anything, but also he wasn't aware that he needed to correct anything. He just, again, thought, everything was there. And of course, everyone knows
Right.
the truth. Why would there not be the truth? And so he didn't really feel that. And even at the end of his life, when he had realized, mistakes that he had made and things that, needed clarification, he was just so past it at that point that it seemed, because he's on sort of death's door at that point, and he's looking at much bigger things than just correcting something that when he's dead, he's not going to care about, necessarily. So he wasn't really, which is a great question, actually, Steve. It's funny because I never really thought about it. I never really thought like, hey, even when I was with him, I was never like, hey, we should write a book and you should correct your thing. It never dawned on me because it didn't really come up in the conversation.
See, it's funny when you say that, because you got to remember Stan was a depression kid, and he came when you didn't even know if you were going to get a dinner in that day. I mean, you're playing sticks outside because you can't afford anything. And I remember reading about Stan and always hearing about his father having money problems and all that, and that always that stuck in his head. But it's funny when you say that about Stan. Oh, he was. Do you remember that time? It was a few years ago. I remember Steve Englehart talking about this on an interview about when Stan he had to renegotiate his contract, and he didn't even think about negotiating because I think there was like $1 million on the table that they were going to offer him. This is when Marvel got to a new buyer or something, and so Stan just signed the contract really quick, not knowing that they were going to offer him like $1 million just as an incentive to sign.
What that was, and it's actually the only of all the things that have ever happened to Stan. If you just put the list together of the bad things that have ever happened to him, the only thing that he didn't want to talk about was that, actually. Even like a week before he died, it came up, and he didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it was I think, honestly, from what my memory of it is like, those the Superman grandchildren kids were always going after DC for more money or more rights, and it was just a never-ending circle of lawsuits. And from my understanding is that at some point in time, Marvel was like, okay, we don't want that to keep happening to us. And so they sort of went back to Stan with like the Bible thickness contract of like, you can never sue us again, or for anything. Like, they just wanted it fully locked down in a way. So they had went to him, and my understanding was it was something like they offered him, I want to say, a couple $1 million, like right now, or something like 3% of all Marvel movie grossing forever, sort of thing. And keep in mind, this was just Spider-Man 1. Like, up until that point, it was like Batman 3 was the longest it went, and you made some money. So it wasn't in hindsight, is obviously a terrible idea, but at the time, who knew it was going to be what it would be. So he asked, I wanted his lawyer or something about it. And his lawyer was like, Stan, don't be an idiot. Take the money. Like, these movies come and go. Like, this is millions of dollars on the table. Like, why would you not take it? And so he signed it. And that really hurt him. Like, that was really hard for him to think about. And it somehow, something, and he mentioned it, and he was like, oh, never mind. I don't even want to talk about it. Cause he understood it towards the end of his life that the money, the probably $100 million or whatever, like of money that was left on the table could have fixed like all his problems. Like, if he had the 100 million, he wouldn't have to do conventions. If he had the 100 million, he could get help for family members, or, like, it would just basically, it'd solve a lot of issues for him if he had that money. And he didn't have that money, and that forced him to do things he didn't necessarily want to be in. So that sort of, weighed on him heavy.
In going through all like the litigation too, I don't know if Otto or Steve, if any of you guys, I read the transcripts and all that, and it's kind of sad when he tells the judge, I just want to die. Like, he was it was just so much weight for Stan Lee to actually say that. It was so sad and heartbreaking to read that. And it was just like, God, here's a guy that gave, billions of people happiness in their lives, that like it all came down to that at the end. His wife's gone, his just everything was kind of just hurting him around, like privately. It was just, and then he was getting a lot of the bad press by a lot of this crap, and it just was so sad to see that. And then, like I said, it hurt me and it hurt Roy. I have to mention that, because, when me and Roy talk and stuff, it's just like that's his friend, and that's a guy that he was his mentor and all that stuff, and him seeing that, and that was a big reason why Roy wanted to see Stan and all that, just to see him at least one more time, because he knew all the bad stuff was going on, and it was hard for us to get to him. But like it was just so sad when you read that stuff, and it's just now.
Well, I have a just to sort of clarify. I have like a sort of weird perspective on that, because it's totally. I understand it's totally sad. I get that, because who wants to hear an old man say they want to die? I get it, right? But
no, right.
I have a weird perspective on it, because the last 6 months of his life, like I said, I spent every day 10 hours a day, every day at his house, from like 11 to like, 7 o'clock. And then I went and worked a night shift till like 3 a.m.
John, can I just show this picture so the viewers know that this was one of the things, like, this was one of the times where you'd spend a lot of, this was one of the days like that you would spend time with him and stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. And so, it's funny, that couch, one of the bodyguards later sat on that couch and broke it, because he was like a giant man, and we had to get a chair for him. But I would go see him every day. And in the last 6 months, he would say that pretty frequently, that he was sort of ready to go. And it makes you sad when they do say that. But like I was telling Steve earlier, is he was such a satisfied man. I mean, can you guys think of anyone who who feels fully satisfied, like with their life and their accomplishments, and doesn't have a lot of regrets, and like, and he's like the only person I've ever met who is so fulfilled with his life. So when a guy who's fulfilled tells you he's ready to die, of course you don't want him to die. You want him to stick around, but he was so fulfilled that you're kind of like, yeah, you're kind of done. Like, your wife is gone. You've accomplished everything you've done. You're like one of the most influential people in the world. Like, and you're old and your body's shutting down. Like, I would kind of probably want to be dead too. Like, it's a very weird mind thing to sort of not want someone, but understand their mindset to
the self-actualization of it,
Yeah. And when he finally did, go ahead.
And John, to go one step further, exactly from what you're saying, when Roy went and he saw him, I mentioned this before, and Roy told me before, like, what Stan always wanted. That was the picture that John took and all that. Oh, remarkable. But what was awesome was Stan told him, like, a wish of Stan was he hated that he couldn't look outside his apartments or wherever he was. He always saw brick, because where he grew up in Brooklyn and in New York and stuff. And Roy said what was ironic when he came to see him, his room, and he was looking out to his backyard. Yeah. And one things that Stan always wanted was to have a great backyard that he could just sit there and look outside and see like the sky or whatever. But like that meant a lot to Stan. And what's funny is Roy said that to me after. He goes, he got what his wish. He was sitting there and he was looking outside, and he was having that happiness from that, because that's something that he always wanted. So
him and his wife used to have lunch out there on the pool, and that was like kind of like the center of where they would be and hang out. So he liked seeing that pool. But yeah, so like, just to circle back. So yeah, so when he eventually did die, it was, not to jump ahead of the story, but he was obviously, it was very upsetting. I mean, I cried and I went to the hospital and I saw, the whole thing. But on the other side of it, it was like, when a guy tells you he's ready to die for 6 months and he dies, like, it does sort of less of a shock. And there is a sense of relief, because you're like, it wasn't like he was suicidal or something. Like, he just lived his whole life. And I was like, God, I'm so jealous of that. Like, that level of fulfillment. Like, I'm afraid to die at all times. I'm like, I haven't done enough, and I'm not, and to have that fulfillment was really, I really admired that sort of opinion, which I know sounds weird, like to an outsider might sound odd, but just that experience, sort of, I learned a lot from that.
Wow. It's good. Steve, you got another one for Mr. Bolerjack?
Sure. There's a lot of misinformation out there And I was wondering if you could clarify.
But yes, I will clarify to the best of my ability. I will.
Okay,
I will clarify.
No names. No names.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the family dynamic.
Mhm.
Now, of course, Stan had a family.
Yeah.
And we kept hearing how there was some schism, something had gone wrong. When you got there, what was your impression of the family dynamic?
So, first I'll work from the outside in. So the first thing is his brother Larry. You know, a lot of people ask where Larry was, and I talk to Larry about once a month. I check in with him because I just want to make sure he lives alone. Like I want to make sure he's okay. You know, and so I talk to him about once a month, and I'll ask him questions about Stan. And the first time I talked to him, we were kind of chatting a little bit, and he told me that I probably know Stan better than him because they're 10 years apart. And when he was 8, Stan was 18 and moved out. And they were not very close. And so sometimes I'll tell him about Stan and stuff, and he just had no idea. So he lived in New York. He's kind of a shut-in. He doesn't go out that much. He lives in a rent-controlled apartment in like Manhattan. It's probably like $400, and everyone else is paying like $4,000. And they didn't see much of each other. And so he was kind of just not in the picture. And then the daughter, there's a whole, personal family dynamic that I won't necessarily dive too deep into, but she, she's very excitable, let's just say. And it's very easy to weaponize that if you're someone else and you want to sort of get power, if you know how to like trigger someone and get them to go off and make them look more unstable, than they may be. It's easy to do that enough times to then you don't take them seriously, or their warnings are there because it's a raving sort of situation. And so I saw that weaponized quite a lot by many different people. And so it's pretty easy to when the brother's gone and the only other person is the daughter, it's very easy to, to sort of get those people out of the way fairly quickly. It's a
John,
repetitive
as we
pattern.
know, right? But John, as we know in this industry, and Steve knows too, Otto's an innocent guy on the outside. But
Yeah,
as you go up that ladder, we deal, and there's money involved. We have to deal with the sociopaths, the narcissists, the psychopaths, and when there's money involved, you're either loved or you're hated, and you're loved because they want access to you and all that. And I get it. So I'm just saying, like, with his daughter and all that stuff, there's always money involved, and once there's money, people get crazy. Like,
the money is always the thing. I mean, the real, and I've said this a few times,
and the power,
is the real test of who you are as a person is when you got control. It's funny to speak of Stan like a sword or something, but when you got control of Stan, you immediately you knew what kind of person you were dealing with, because as soon as you got that kind of power and that kind of access and that kind of everything, the real you comes out. So like I generally tell people when they say, well, I heard from this person. I mean, I have people come up to me all the time and they'll say, not all the time, but they come up to me and they'll say, yeah, I heard you were a real asshole because this person said this or that. And this, and I go, listen, so you just ask around about anyone in Stan's circle, and I'll let my reputation speak to myself.
Oh yeah.
It becomes very clear who is what, based when you get that power. So I always tell people, look, I don't need to be the right one. I don't need to be, I'm not going to run around and tell everyone I was best friends with Stan and I need the attention. I'm like, I'll just let,
Right.
people can talk amongst themselves and decide who did what. But Stan was like a divining rod of like, are you a good person or not? 5 minutes of power with Stan and we'll see who you are fairly quickly.
Well, let me toot your little horn for a second.
Yeah.
John won't say anything, and I won't go into detail, but I want people out there to know. Me and John have talked a lot, and we know a lot that's going on, the stuff that can't be said publicly and stuff. But I want people to know that John has been offered things, and he never took it. And that's why I will always love this guy and respect him, because he could have profited huge on this. And this is just something I'm saying for you, John, that you never took that advantage. You never took that easy route and stuff. And that is a testament to who you are. And that's, I love you for that, because not many people can do that. And you know what, not to toot my horn, but similar things have happened to me. And I would never do that, because you loved where you were and who you were with, and you were trying to make the best, like celebrating his life and all that. And I do the same too. So, I mean, this is why
when I there was a period of time where I was in Stan's life, and then there was a sort of Game of Thrones situations where people kept taking over and cutting other people out, and I got separated from Stan, and I thought I'd never see him again, and I sort of just accepted my fate that I just would never see him again, and luckily I got back at the end in Stan's life, and I told him that he asked me for help to help him out, and I said I'd only help him if we didn't do conventions anymore. And we sort of limited access to certain people because it was just going to end poorly. And I said, those are my terms. Otherwise, I can't repeat the cycle. And he agreed. And I told him the first day, I was like, let's just not do anything, Stan. Let's just be really boring. Like, let's just live very boring lives.
Awesome.
Like, if you don't want to go out, you won't go out. If you want to go out, like, let's not do anything. And we did that. And then he sort of he wanted some disposable income for his daughter and just for the staff. Cause at that point he had security guards, round the clock nurses, not nearly as much money as you thought he had. And he needed to generate some income to sort of cover, cause he was hemorrhaging a lot of money. You're talking 24-hour-a-day bodyguards who live there weeks at a time, which is not cheap, and we're talking, one or two at a time. So we started doing signings, but even then I was like, okay, Stan, I'm going to put one book in front of you and I'm going to say, are you done? And I'm going to put it. And sometimes we would just sign like 12 books and I would just go, all right, we're done. Like you're already moving too slow for me, old man. I'm not going to put another one in front of you. Like, and I sort of just like cut him off. And I remember going to some of the dealers who would send me books and I'd say, look, he does like 12 a day. You're sending me like 100. Like, are you ready to get this in like 4 weeks or whatever? Like, I'm not. And I remember some of them would call me and they'd say, look, I'll give you 10 grand if you just get these books done for me, like in 2 days, like just make it happen. Right, and I was just like, I just couldn't do it. Like it was, I felt so privileged and lucky to be back in his life that I was just like, I cannot do that to him. Like he looked at me the first day I was back in the eyes and he said, everybody I know that I trusted has betrayed me. I need your help. Like, and then he said, please don't let me down.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's like when an old man who's like broken is looking at you and he says, please don't let me down. Like that's the only thing that still gets me teary-eyed when I think about it. And I was there, like I saw him when he died, and that still doesn't make me as teared up as that, because the weight of a human being, like just asking you not to let him down. And like, it was very like heavy. And I was like, I cannot do that. Like that's the end of it.
And John, once again, this is why I love you. And it's like similar things have happened to me already. Yeah. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. Oh, do this. And can we? I never do that. And then people get pissed at me and I don't care that they do.
Yeah, they get mad. They get mad because you don't do it. And you're just like, because you're not playing ball. Everyone, because money makes, money, this whole, Steve knows this whole industry is based on money and, and greasing wheels and relationships. And, you give it.
Believe you me. I had so many sort of relationships sort of end on a sour note because of Stan. Yeah. And I knew some dealer friends of mine, acquaintances.
Yeah.
And when I was speaking to them, I just thought they were heartless. And they were like, you know what? I've got to get these books signed by Stan. And you know what? I really hope that, he passes just as he signs my book.
Yeah.
And then they would smile at me thinking that was funny. And I would be like, that's not funny. And I said, what are you, some sort of vulture? And they looked at me like I was the crazy one. That. And then they would go to their other dealer friends and say, man, what happened to Steve? What the hell's wrong with that guy? But again, breaking all retailer rules, when people would come up to me and say, hey, I want to get this book signed by Stan. How much do you think it's going to go up? Instead of me saying, oh, let's do the sale.
Yeah.
I would say, so that's the only thing that's important to you?
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
And they would go, well, I said, so that's it then, huh? So it's just about how much money you're going to make, then hopefully you're probably going to think he's going to die and you're going to be able to flip some more money, huh? And I would do that again and again and again. And so after a while, people would get the hint. Don't come to me and ask me about how much money I'm going to make off Stan's signature.
Yeah.
So in my own way, I wasn't right there. In my own way, I was trying to bring a little bit of sense and order to a situation that had gone completely crazy, where everyone was money mad, and they knew they were running out of time. It was like they're on a Titanic.
Yeah.
The ship was going down, And just as they're going down, like, I've got one more book to sign.
Yeah, no, totally. That's the thing. And Stan used to say, he actually used to say that we'd be at a convention and he'd be like on his way out after signing a million things. And it was always like, oh, there's one more Stan. Oh, there's one more Stan. And Stan would always say, there's always one more. Like he knew it. Like I saw Stan getting in the car to leave the convention, signing a book on his lap that someone had given him to sign right before he got, in the car. But to your thing, Steve, when Stan died, I was driving to the hospital that morning. He had already died and it hadn't broke yet. And I was driving there because a security guard who's a very dear friend of mine had said, look, you should just come see him, like say goodbye. You're good, just come be with us. And so I'm driving there and I get this call from a number. It's not on my phone. And I answer it, and it's this lawyer that we had done a couple things with a couple weeks before. Like he was there one time doing something and he had asked Stan to sign something for him. And I was like, no, he's like asleep. Like I'm not waking him up. So we'll sign your stupid piece of paper. And so I said, yeah, I'll get it to you later, and I'll never get it to you, sort of like, and he left. Right, so it's this guy and he's like, oh, I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry. I heard about Stan. And first I'm like, how did he hear about Stan? And I'm just like, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Random person I don't know. And then he goes, a long pause. And then he goes, so I just wanted to check, did Stan ever get around to signing that thing for me? Like, and I found out like 12 minutes before that Stan had died. And like, that's the thing. And so I just lost it. And I was like, don't ever effing call me again. Oh. If I ever see you, I'm going to hit you in the face. Like, like, never, ever contact me for this again. And I just hung up the phone. And then I could tell when the news broke because my phone just like started going nuts. Like it was just all the text messages from my friends, my family, and then the dealers. Hey, did my books get done? Hey, is it true? Like brrr, just everyone, hitting me up. I just turned the phone off because I was just like, I can't,
John, I gotta tell you something. It's great. First off, this leads into why we do this podcast. Steve and Otto has joined the club because we love this and it's passion and it's all about the love of. But there's something I got to say to you. And Steve knows this and Otto knows this because I sent them stuff and you do too. I've been called Roy's boy toy. I live in Roy's basement. Otto, how many I sent you? Remember I sent you some of these people hate my guts because they want Roy here or they want this thing here. And I take all this impact. But it's like you said, and then you're friends with people, and then you talk with them, and then all of a sudden it's a little like, hey, do you think you could get this for me? There's always a cost.
Can I get a remark done? Can you get this remark?
And maybe I'm just getting old and I'm getting soft, but there is a part when I think about. I mean, we're very lucky to be on the other side of that table, Steve stands by the table, watches a million people come up and say, I'm a big fan of yours, X, Y, and Z, but you're there going to dinner and you're on that other side. So you don't have to fanboy out so hard because it's more like an even playing field. But on the other side of that table is a person who just waited, 6 hours to have Stan sign their book and wants that moment. Like you, like Otto, like you.
I'm going to tell you that story. I don't want to cut you off.
You sort of deserve an experience because you've just devoted 6 hours of your time. And I understand that, but you are one of 1,000 people and there's no way to give you that moment. But Stan is aware of that pressure of like, I have to be the most entertaining part of this guy's day, but these guys will not be the most entertaining part of my day. And I have to repeat this, for every person in the line. It's an untenable relationship to be able to deliver goods.
I want to tell you what it was like for me, and it'll take 3 minutes at the longest. But growing up, I was a kid. I have severe dyslexia. I couldn't read. It's because of Stan Lee that I could read comics. That's what my father did. He would buy me comics when I was a kid, 1st and 2nd grade. That's my life story. That's how I got into comics. So Rhode Island, Connecticut. I forgot what year. 6 hours waiting in line.
2016, Otto.
2016. Yep. I had just gotten back into comic books. I said, okay, let me get, 1 or 2 things that are important to me. And I waited 6 hours and I'm watching this and I really wasn't back into the con scene. And I realized that it's just, Stan Stein moving on. And I understood that, I know the way the world works, but I said, I got to say something, right? I got to get at least eye contact. I just don't want him looking at my stomach. You know what I mean? So when he got to my book, I said to him, I said, Mr. Lee, I go, I just want to thank you. It's because of you that I know how to read as an adult. And he picked his head up and he said, why, thank you. And I grabbed his hand and I said, and my name's Otto. You know, and that was it. I grabbed his hand and I just shook and I was like, and my name's Otto. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I went on my way. And that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to just, you know, take that, you know, 30 seconds and have that time to say, hey, this is who I am. You're going to forget me in 5 seconds, but I'm never going to forget you. And more importantly, I thanked you because, you know, how many kids couldn't read and then started because of comics. So that's really was one of the things that was really, really important to me. So the thing I had signed, whatever, but it was that, and I would do that again 7 days from Sunday, all over again to thank him. So that was very important to me. And so
you gotta I mean, look, you gotta take your shot because like I said, it's a time thing, you know, and you gotta
that was
take
my
your shot.
And I took it, and you know, that was one of the greatest things I ever did. I just shook it and I go, and my name's Otto. Thank you very much.
I was actually a little bit more fortunate. I had my book signed by Stan in 1994, completely different era.
Yeah.
And the main thing for me was I knew the signing was coming up. And I kept thinking to myself, what am I going to get signed? What am I going to do? You know, because I had 10,000 Silver Age books. And I was agonizing. I was like, oh my God, this is Stan. What am I going to get signed? Is it going to be FF48? La, la, la. So I go in line and I've got 2 comics with me. It's Thor 189 and 190. Okay, nothing special for anyone else. I just happened to love that story the most from Stan. And I remember as we got up to the desk, it had a little note there and it said, 1 item signed only. And there I am with 2. And so I was like, oh, well, I put down both right in front of him. And I was like, Stan, I said, I know you wrote 5,000 million things, but to me personally, this is my favorite thing that you ever did. And it hits me emotionally every time. And the security guy came up to like tell me that, you know, that I could only have 1 book signed. And then Stan grabbed both of them and went, oh, yes, I remember these. And the security guy walked back. And I was like, yeah, well, thank you, Stan.
Yeah.
So he signed the books for me, you know. But for me, it wasn't like, later on, I'm going to CGC those books.
Yeah.
I'm going to flip them. Thanks, Stan, you made me money. They're on my mantelpiece now. And I can look. And for me personally, to be able to tell Stan that what that story meant for me.
Yeah.
Again, it's 1994. I'm lucky enough. I have a photograph of it. I have a photograph. I'm wearing some really odd, horrible 1990s clothes, but it's there. And so to me, that's my little special moment, you know. And again, that's obviously Stan at the time in 1994. You can imagine he was like a buzzsaw.
Yeah. Totally.
And mine, John, I just want to, we're all throwing out our first Stan Lees. I'll throw out mine because mine was actually pretty funny and they captured it on film. I don't know if you remember, John, I put it up on Instagram. I'm at New York Comic Con and it's at 2007 and we're filming our Hero Envy stuff and Keith is filming me. I didn't even know Stan. I didn't even know who was there. I'm all about me. Who gives a crap about everybody else? So I'm walking through this. I would basically interview or talk to creators or whatever. But I'm walking through and I see a whole bunch of people and I see all these stormtroopers walking. And I look. I swear to God, and it's on film. I look, and me and Stan Lee look at each other at that exact time. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Stan Lee. I didn't even know he was there. I stick out my hand. And everybody's trying to stop. This is all on film. And then you see Stan Lee's hand grab mine and he shakes my hand. And then he goes off and he looks at me and he points to me and he says something. I don't remember. I was like, did that just happen? It was so funny how that just happened. And it's on film. And I usually put it up every year. It was in February. But it was such a magical moment how me and Stan saw each other. That was the first time I ever saw him. And I didn't even know he was there. So, yeah, it was like remarkable. And John, before we end this, I want to say, what was your first? Is that the first time you ever met Stan? When was the first time you met him?
I'll give you 2 things. I'll give you my favorite and my first time. The irony is, the first time I met Stan, I have a photo of it. I should send it to you. It was awful. I met Stan. Someone was in his entourage had asked me to do some prints for them, and I was told that Stan really liked them and that he wanted me to do stuff for him. And I'm an idiot because I'm like 25 and what the hell do I know? And so I'm just like so excited to be doing stuff for Stan. And they say, come out to Philadelphia on your own dime and he'll sign some prints for you and you guys will do a signing together. That's the quote. You will do a signing together. Now, again, I look back and I'm like, God, you are an idiot. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, I'm going to do the signing with Stan. It's like, I was just a comic. I was an artist alley grinder. So this was like just going to the Super Bowl all of a sudden. Pluck you out of high school, right to the Super Bowl. So I go all the way out to Philadelphia. Of course, suddenly it's, things are changing. He's busy. He'll sign some prints for you, but you're not doing a signing with him. And the whole thing changes. But I still get to meet Stan, so it's fine. So it's Sunday, like 5:45 of a con that's closing at 6. Hey, get over here, hurry up. And then so I rush over there and I have this photo with me and this other guy who did the print, and Stan's holding it up and he looks furious. Like he does not want to be there. Oh. And I come back and I tell my wife at the time, I go, well, that sucked. And because I could just tell like he didn't want to be there. And again, I'm like there and I'm not even in like the entourage or anything. And I'm just like, how the hell am I the only person that sees how unhappy this guy is? And how is he still here? Like, even then it seemed weird, like at the time. So that was the first meeting of me with Stan, which was like, now it's ironic. This is how it ends up. But the best thing is I have it on, I used to drive with them. I talked to him and I had a GoPro set up and we'd have conversation, and he would get tired and he just kind of be doing off his own thing. So I had this great clip where I'm just driving and he's just kind of looking out the window and he looks over at me and you see him like kind of like look me up and down and kind of like size me up like a little bit. And then I'm just driving. I don't know. He's looking at me and he goes, hey, I got a question. And I go, what's up? And he goes, so you got the tattoos, right? You got tattoos all over your body. And he goes, and then you thought the hair was a good idea to just add on top of that. Like that's what you needed to finish the look. And I just start laughing. And he was always had like a joke or a witty sort of thing, but it was just funny to watch the gears in his head as he's trying to figure out what the joke's going to be. And he just hits me with that. And those are actually my favorite kind of moments with him. I mean, like going to like, movie sets and stuff is awesome. It's very fun, but those are like the things that are like the best.
Yeah. So Otto, show a few of those other pictures of John. That's John. Want to tell us about this one again?
Yeah. So Frank Miller was doing a signing at Barnes and Noble for, I think like The Dark Knight Returns. They like republished it or something, and Stan was going to go surprise him. And so that was us waiting in the green room, or I think in an office waiting to sort of surprise him. I just really like that footage because it's like, it's the candid stuff is the stuff that I like the best because it's more intimate and it's not as posed. I also remember about that signing. I didn't know Frank Miller had a bodyguard. And so when I was going out with Stan, I was filming him, and at the last minute, this guy got in between me and Stan. He like thought I was just a crazy fan, and he was all about it. And I was just like, "Geez," like that's what I remember most about that time.
And I had to put this one in because I just discovered that was from the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 video, and you didn't know that. Like, look, I love it how Stan is wearing his jacket and he's got Roy on the right side because they used to call Roy his good right arm. And so they put Roy there, and I just thought that was so wonderful to say. And then there was one more. Can you put up the picture of at us at Trapedo?
Yes.
Yeah, this is we showed this before, but this is John presenting us with some things that were on top of Stan's on Stan's desk for many years, and the Spider-Man lighter and the pins, and Roy was so happy, and John actually gave me the pins, but I gave them to Roy because I knew they meant more to Roy, and they're on now. They linger on Roy's desk now with his stuff, so where they should be and stuff, and that's just awesome that you did that. Another reason why we love you, John, and all that stuff, and so it's great. So John, right before we leave out of here, okay, we got all the Stan Lee stuff. The first comic you ever saw, what was it? In the first comic that you fell in love with the medium, okay?
The first comic I ever saw was and I'm gonna show my age because I'm not that old. Fantastic Four 416. was a Pacheco issue. It's like a double page thing.
Yes, it was
all
an
the team on 'em.
onslaught crossover.
It's a, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Now, in that issue, if you open I think it's even at the middle of the exact middle of the book, there is a panel where Submariner is jumping out of the water to talk to Fantastic Four, and I would kill for that page. It is my favorite old comic book memory as a kid, and I remember he looked so awesome and dynamic. And that's when I first noticed that he had wings on his ankles. And so I'll show you as a tribute to that. I actually have a tattoo that's from purely the love of that panel. And I know it's a weird comic, but it's
Vestigial
so
wings.
perfect. Yeah,
They call them the vestigial wings. Yeah.
So that is my first, and it always will hold a special place in my heart because it's so dynamically done. That issue is great. I always wanted to meet Carlos Pacheco, and I always look if that page ever pops up, I'm like, now what art prices cost, I'm going to pay way too much.
And of course, that issue was written by the great Tom DeFalco.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John, what was the first comic that you actually started collecting?
When I really started collecting, I mean, I worked at a comic store and I casually read things here and there, but the first thing I really started like religiously following and consuming that wasn't a back issue, that was current. I think I fell really hard for Brian Michael Bendis's Daredevil run. I remember really being like into that. And I remember admiring how, and I was actually just talking to Bendis about this like a couple weeks ago. I really remember admiring how you could have an entire issue where it was just a courtroom and Daredevil was barely doing anything and you could still be riveted by the issue. Like that was like thing that I was just like extremely impressed by, that I was like, I'm basically reading Law and Order and I'm a teenager, so I should not be excited by this. And it was fascinating. And that's like, I really remember like consuming that entire run and being really obsessed with that run.
Now, John, do you still collect or you long gone?
Well, actually, unlike Steve, because Steve is actually someone that I would admire to be because he's still got that passion and that love for it. But I mostly sell comics now. So it kind of really grinds you where you're just thinking, you buy something and you're like, how much could I flip that for? And it's hard to like, sort of find that sort of love. But
yes, because I did see you at WonderCon with that. You had a couple of stacks of books and a big smile on your face. I was like, oh, look, there he goes.
Yeah, the thing I have a few things, some art that I keep, but the thing that I have that I cherish the most is a Marvel program from MarvelCon 76, and it's a very like nice condition, and it's signed by like, you know, Stan and John Romita and like a bunch of like the old timers from that show. So I have that, and then I also have the deep dive. I have the insert that had the program for the day. So it says like 10 a.m. Sal Buscema, How to Draw Conan, and like 145 panel. And it's
can you believe that?
So it's that, and then it's like a another fold in with some more information about like, you know, hotels and where to get it. It has like a Spider-Man on the front, so it's like complete. So I have those, and I have that, and I have a second one from the next year that has like a Keith Pollard sketch on it and a Joe Sinnott sketch on it. And it's all like, and those are because it's so random and like weird. Like I see a Hulk, I don't know about you, Steve, but when I see a Hulk 181 and someone has it and they're like showing it off, I'm like, I've literally seen like 50,000 of those things. Like, I can't get excited about it anymore. It's gotta be some weird thing. It can only be worth $10, but if it was some like weird Cracker Jack thing from 1946, I'd be, that is cool. Like that's what I want.
And last but not least, John, I remember you telling me, but what was, I know what it is, but I think it'd be nice to say that. Well, what did you take from Stan? You have a little sentimental thing from Stan.
Here's what I'll do is I actually don't publicly say what that is. I like to keep it for me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But what I will say is I was initially, this is actually even better story. I used to go to drop Stan off after conventions or pick him up after conventions, and we'd go to his house. Now, if you've seen Age of X-Men Days of Future Past, when the missiles are being launched and Stan has his cameo with his wife, that's his actual front yard. That's like not a set. That's what his thing. And so you'll see a door, and in the background you'll see a door, and you'll see a lion, like ceramic lion head that probably cost $8 from Home Depot on the side of the door. Whenever I'd go to see him, I'd always see that ceramic lion head because it just, and I got used to seeing it remind me of Stan. So one time when I was driving Stan, I said, Stan, you know, because Stan would always talk about, he'd be like, I'm getting so old, like I don't want to be, like living to be 100 is not great. And I'd go, well, Stan, while we're talking about something really morbid on our drive, I'm like, can I have that lion head when you die?
I know what you're talking about.
It'll remind me of you. Yeah, it'll remind me of you. And it's also, and I was also like, Stan, no one's going to be fighting over the lion head. All right. We both know there's bigger fights to be had. So that lion head will just slip right by and I'll be able to keep that with no problem. And he goes, totally. He's like, it's yours. You have my permission to take it. So I'm like, great. That's what I want to remember him by. It's this $8 ceramic lion's head. So unfortunately, that mysteriously disappeared because it's in the cameo thing. So technically it's like a prop and someone mysterious person stole it.
I wonder.
I remember when I came back into Stan's life, I remember because I hadn't been in Stan's life for 6 months or so. And the idea of when you go back to it, you're driving up his thing, up the hill and around, and it's all kind of muscle memory. And I thought it was over and now it's all kind of flooding back. And I remember going through the things and getting to that door. And it was the one thing that was not in its place and it was missing. And as soon as I saw it was missing, I was just like, that son of a bitch, he took it.
I know what you're talking about.
And so that is the thing, that I really wanted. And again, it has no value. Like it doesn't have any value. Like no one's going to pay for that. It doesn't have any market value, but he just took it anyways because he wanted to have it. And I remember being really bummed about that because I was like, I really did want that. Like it was something, and it also was something that no one would steal from me because it doesn't have it only has sentimental value. So that was like, that's what I wanted to keep it. I got to keep another thing as a secondary prize, but the main prize, unfortunately, it never popped up. Unfortunately, I was sure it was going to end up somewhere, but I never saw the light of day. But yeah, if you Days of Future Past, you'll see it. If you look at this cameo, you'll see it in the background.
Well, John, thank you for I wanted people to know what I know and like who you are and especially at a time that, it's all sensationalized, mythologized now, all Stan's life and now the ending of his life. And I wanted people to hear the truth coming directly from the kid who was there. And I just want to say, I love you, brother. And I thank you for doing this. And I thank you for being who you are and what you are in a time when one of our heroes needed you, and hey, you're an honorary member of the Roy Boys. And I love, and I can't wait. We'll be seeing you again at a show. And, Steve, just wonderful. Any last words, Steve, Otto, to the man?
Yes. John, I would like to personally thank you for what's been said in this episode is probably going to soothe a lot of people's minds in regards to the fact that we didn't know, and only you would know, that he was content. Mm-hmm. He had no regrets, and he was happy with what he had done. And that first-hand information is so important to many people who are probably watching this, who love Stan, and maybe have heard all of the stories and thinking, oh my God, he was miserable, he was being tortured and he had all these regrets. You've just taken all that away. And that's an invaluable service. One, again, it's one of the things that this podcast can do. And two, I want to personally thank you for treating Stan so well, passing this information on. And I know at some point in the future, when all these little lawsuits have been wrapped up, and someone wants a definitive word, they're going to have to come to you on these aspects, and you are going to be able to write with a perfect, unbiased account, and everyone's going to say, "This is the definitive project." And if I see your name on it, I will know.
Yeah. We'll do a podcast when that happens, and then I'll be able to. Oh well, we're gonna need like 4 hours. We'll
do it. We'll do it.
You're gonna see.
It'll be a 12-issue miniseries.
Yeah, it's gonna be. We're gonna have to sort of separate podcasts just to break it down. So
and John, I was good, right? But I was good. Yeah. I controlled myself too. I mentioned no names either. Keep this straight,
And for me, my last thing I just want to say, Steve is 100% correct that it's important that people know that. Sure, was there a lot of sad stuff? Sure, of course, but it was not. I always say that Stan died a free man at the end of his life. He did what he wanted, and he didn't do what he didn't want to do. You know what I mean? It's just he called the shots, and he was not like this miserable, sad person. He was actually happy, even when the whole tornado of chaos is around, he generally was in good spirits, and people should know that he really did go out on his own terms, and he was very pleased with that. And so it is, and it's I like hearing people from Steve, because I lose perspective because I know too much. So it's, as someone who's not me, I like hearing that it's doing, some good for people to hear that. So I appreciate you guys having me, and
Well, John, we need you to get straight those shitty biographies that have been coming out.
I'm trying my best here.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. This has been a special Stanley special. Thank John, Otto from the Grotto, 3 Men in the Basement. Steve says boom. Steve, get us out here as we whip Milner.
Boom!
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.